to Scott Fox After 9. This episode is going to be chock full of audio today. You're going to hear from Ontario Premier Doug Ford. You're going to hear from Liberal Member of Ontario Provincial Parliament, Rob Serjanik, who has been a guest of mine on the pod in the past, because he brought something up yesterday that is kind of interesting. Should there be a cap on how much you can resell tickets for? There used to be a cap. Now there's not a cap. Now the Premier's even talking about maybe putting a cap on how much money you can make when you resell tickets. So I'm going to take that up here on the pod. You're also going to hear from federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, and you're going to hear from the Prime Minister after that big primetime address to the nation last night. Serious question before I get too far into it. What was that last night? Why did they bill that as an address to the nation to make it seem like something very, very serious that all Canadians need to pay attention to? It wasn't an address to the nation. It was an address to students at the University of Ottawa that they televised for free. I'd love to talk to somebody in broadcast television today and find out if they got duped, because normally, if the Prime Minister wants a half hour of television in prime time, complete with pre and post analysis, he's going to have to pay for that. I know for sure if Pierre Poilievre wanted half an hour to speak to the Canadian people in prime time, they would certainly charge him for that. I'm wondering if the networks knew that that was just the Prime Minister, given mainly the same speech he gives every time he goes out. It's his stump speech. And I wonder if they knew that he's about to call an election, because that was like a half-hour infomercial last night for Carney talking about the budget. But there were some interesting things in there, and if you give me about 45 minutes to an hour, I'm going to break it all down in this episode of Scott Fox After 9. Quickly, before I get too far into it, I want to remind you tomorrow is Listener DMs. I've got a ton of them in already, and I'm going to be talking about so many different topics in tomorrow's pod. The great Anna Almeida will join me for that. Next week, there's going to be a Silent Date Guy episode as well on the pod. That'll come out as a standalone episode. It always does, because I use song clips that there may or may not be some copyright issues there. That's debatable, and it gets flagged on my YouTube feed. So I do the standalone episodes a little bit differently when I know it's going to get a copyright strike. So next week's Silent Date Guy episode may not show up in YouTube, but it should be available on the podcast, or you can hear it in my radio show, weekday mornings, 5:30 till 9 on Light 92.1 FM all across Southern Ontario. There's the housekeeping out of the way. Now let's get into the content, and we'll start off with kind of a controversial subject. And I don't really have my mind made up on this, so I think it's something that we should talk out. This is Ontario Premier Doug Ford yesterday outside the legislature.
A lot of Blue Jays fans are facing big ticket prices. Your government scrapped legislation that would have capped those resale prices. Will you bring that back?
Yeah, we actually talked about that. And, my personal opinion, I got to talk to the whole team, but they're gouging the people. When you have one player in the market that controls the tickets, that's not right for the people. So we're actually reviewing that right now.
Considering legislation?
Yeah. Well, we're looking at that right now.
Why did you stop it in the first place?
Well, let's look at it and we'll see. I just don't believe in one company controlling everything. And that's what's happening right now with Ticketmaster, in my opinion.
Man, the Queen's Park media is so hostile because it's a Conservative government. It is bananas how aggressively they go after Doug Ford, and none of those reporters would have the stones to go after Mark Carney like that. I think it's shameful how they conduct themselves sometimes, but either way, a pretty good question of the Premier. You see, we used to have legislation in Ontario, and it was to come into effect shortly after Doug Ford became Premier. The legislation was that you can only mark up tickets a certain amount if you're going to resell them. And I don't exactly know the history on why the Ford government scrapped that legislation, but you just heard Premier Doug Ford talking about maybe bringing it back. I got a couple of questions around this. Now, the reason that this comes up is because so many people tried to get Blue Jays World Series tickets, and it was a mess. It is amazing to me that when everybody else can see that what Ticketmaster does is extremely controversial, they can see that it's not all that effective. There were people in the queue yesterday that probably should have got tickets and didn't get tickets. Or Wednesday, I apologize, is when they went on sale. It seems like the system is kind of messed up. And if they did get tickets, you could buy them for, say, $350 a ticket. Okay, $700 a pair. But then they would go online and try and sell it for $5,000 a pair. Now, some people would say that's not fair. Not fair. I want to go to a Jays game and I don't want to pay $5,000 for a pair of tickets. Is it that it's not fair, or is that just how supply and demand works? Serious question. I don't know what the right or wrong answer is here on this one. I'd like to think that if somebody buys tickets and then they realize, I can't really go now, or I won't be able to get a babysitter, whatever, that they'll sell the tickets. And if they make a little bit of money off of that, they bought them for $100 and they sold them for $125 each, no problem. They made $50. But making thousands off of these things, is that right? Or if somebody's willing to pay $5,000 for a pair of tickets, is that what they're worth and what you should be able to sell them for? Does the government have any place in determining how much money you're allowed to make? I suppose if you're on the selling end of this, it sucks that the government may step in and say you can't make any more than 50% of the face value. So if you have a ticket that cost you $100, you wouldn't be able to sell it for more than $150. As a buyer, you might like that cap. But is it fair? And is there a role for government in regulating how much people are willing to pay on the open market? Yesterday, Liberal MPP Rob Serjanik stood up in the legislature and he asked for unanimous consent to bring back the legislation that the Liberals passed that Doug Ford scrapped shortly after he came into power. Listen to this.
Consent for leave to move a motion without notice asking the government to immediately reinstate the cap on ticket resale prices at 50% more than face value.
Serjanik is seeking unanimous consent for leave to move a motion without notice asking the government to immediately reinstate the cap on ticket resale prices at 50% more than face value. Agreed?
No. Agreed.
Well, there you go. You need unanimous consent in order to get unanimous consent. Rob Serjanik there wanted to try and make this instant. Hey, if there's unanimous consent, we can pass it right now. You're not allowed to make more than 50% of the face value. Again, if tickets cost you $100, you wouldn't be able to sell them for more than $150. But we know now, without any legislation, someone could take that $100 ticket and sell it for $3,000. Is that fair? Or again, if somebody's willing to pay $3,000, does that mean that that's what that ticket is worth? I'm really not sure what the right answer is here. I don't know. I would love to think that the free market can regulate itself and the laws of supply and demand will prevail. But some people are getting ridiculous about this. You know, I think back to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, and I know there was a lot of parents that did not want to have to go home and tell their kid, sorry, I wasn't able to get Taylor Swift tickets, or sorry, these tickets are just too expensive. Everybody wanted the tickets. Everybody wanted to go to the show. But there were some people who bought them knowing full well they weren't going to go to the show. They bought those tickets simply so they could sell them at a big profit. Hey, if you take the time to log in and you're one of the lucky ones who gets those tickets, is that fair deal? You can just sell it for whatever you want. Those are your tickets. You can do what you want with them. Or is there a role for government in regulating how much these tickets should or could be resold for? What role does Ticketmaster play in all of this? Is Ticketmaster making money off of the ticket sale and then also off of the resale? Because if they are, I don't think that's fair either. Here's a little bit more from Ontario Liberal MPP Rob Serjanik.
In 2019, Doug Ford's government removed a previous Liberal law that would cap ticket sales at 50% of face value for your favorite sporting event or concert. Today, I sought unanimous consent to bring that back. The government, they said no. Ontario Liberals are going to fight for solutions so you don't get ripped off.
He is such a good member of provincial parliament, by the way. I really like Rob, and I think that if Liberals are smart, since they're going to be electing a new leader anyway, there's somebody who deserves serious consideration. Yes, this is a Conservative praising a Liberal member of provincial parliament. Rob and I had a great chat. It was a couple of weeks ago about speed enforcement cameras. And as a Liberal, he's in favor of those cameras. As a Conservative, I'm opposed to those cameras. If you want to hear some good debate about an issue, trying to see the other person's point of view, but being firm in your position, You should go back and listen to that episode. I thought it was great. Rob's great. And I don't know why it had to play out like that yesterday. You heard Premier Ford already say that they may have to look at legislating it. We used to have a law on the books for this. The Liberals asked for unanimous consent to simply bring back the law we already had. And the Conservatives voted against it. This is very similar to last week in Ottawa. The Conservatives proposed changes to our justice system. The Liberals voted against it. That was because the Liberals wanted to introduce their own legislation. In this case, it's likely because the Conservatives want to introduce their own legislation on ticket resale. I don't think it's right. We just want this stuff done, right? As members of the middle class, you and I, we just want this stuff done. It doesn't matter who introduces the law. If it's a good law, vote for the law. If it needs changes, okay, that's a different story. But this law was already approved by the legislature. Now, not this current one. It was approved and ready to come into effect in 2019 until it got scrapped. How do you feel about this? If you want to weigh in, I'll try and read some of them tomorrow on listener DMs. Does the government have any role in regulating the cost of ticket prices and how much you can resell a ticket for? Is this a fair market thing? Is this about supply and demand? Or is this about equity? Hey, there's lots of people who would love to go to a Jays game, but they don't have $5,000. Is that your fault for not having $5,000? Is it someone else's fault for trying to make a profit? Do we need a law? All questions that are on my mind, and I would love to hear from you because it's an interesting topic, and this is likely going to come up in the legislature, and it's something you're probably going to have to decide how you feel about. Now I'm going to move on. The Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, yesterday had a very busy day. At one point, he spoke to the Prime Minister. He went and met with Mark Carney, and the two of them discussed the upcoming budget. Now, Pierre Poilievre is not going to tell us what Mark Carney said in that meeting. That would be inappropriate for him to do that. He's not going to say what the Prime Minister said, but he is able to talk a little bit about what he said and what his priorities are for the upcoming budget. I don't know how much of this I'm going to play, maybe a couple of minutes. Listen to Pierre Poilievre yesterday as he exits Mark Carney's office.
Do you hear anything to change your mind?
Well, we had a good conversation. My message, of course, to the Prime Minister is that people can't afford to pay any more, that they're tapped out, their grocery bills, their rent is too high after 10 years of excess spending. So I shared my view that we need the government to bring down its inflationary deficits and taxes. I was grateful for the chance to sit down with the Prime Minister. We had a good conversation. He didn't make any commitments, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what he comes up with.
You said you hoped he was in listening mode. Did you feel that was the case?
I think we both were. We had a good back and forth, and we shared our respective views. I'm not going to report to you anything that he said because that was in the four walls of the room. I can only speak for myself, and I reiterated that we need this to be an affordable budget. We've seen over the last 10 years of Liberal deficit spending is driven up the cost of living and driven down investment in our country. So my message is it's time to reverse course on the costly decade of deficit spending that has given us more expensive food and housing. The Canadian people deserve a break. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. And so if the Prime Minister is serious about making Canada a more affordable country, then he needs to bring forward an affordable budget.
Do you get the sense
over
this is a budget
over
that you can
history?
support?
Sorry, go ahead.
We can take both.
Okay,
Yeah.
you go first.
Do you get the sense that this is a budget you could support?
I haven't seen anything. So, but I've sort of laid out my conditions for the party, and we'll see what he comes up with.
We will. And last night, the Prime Minister very loosely talked about the upcoming budget. Didn't give us any specific concrete information. There were no numbers. But he did say we're going to need to make sacrifices. And I'm curious to know what that means, because it seems like the sacrifices are going to be sacrifices of programs that you like, I like, most people like. I'm wondering, though, is the government prepared to make any sacrifices? Is the government willing to cut some of their own budgets? You know, it wasn't that long ago, and the media barely covered it, but our Foreign Affairs Department spent $55,000 in 1 month on alcohol. Most businesses won't let you expense alcohol. We did $55,000 in 1 month. Is the government going to cut back on stuff like that? Are they going to cut back on some of their perks? Are they going to cut back on anything that affects them? Or is it just the middle class that's going to have to make, I quote, sacrifices? We'll find out. Now, I am going to get to the Prime Minister's speech and give it its due time, although he already got a half hour of free primetime network coverage last night. Free! I'm shocked that the TV networks let that happen. But before I get to that, let's hear a little bit of a different portion of Pierre Poilievre's day. After question period, he came out and met with the media. The media is dying to ask him questions about the scandal, I guess, involving his comments about the RCMP. So that came up, and so did a bunch of other things. Here is Pierre Poilievre yesterday in Ottawa.
Today, I will be meeting with Prime Minister Carney. We will be talking about the budget. This will be the 10th Liberal budget, and Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. Conservatives believe Canadians deserve an affordable budget that will lead to an affordable life. And that means getting government spending under control and eliminating inflationary taxes that drive up the cost of living. So here's the core reality. We can't escape. Every dollar the government spends comes out of your pocket. The more they spend, the more things cost. Just yesterday that we saw that since Mr. Carney has doubled the deficits left behind by his predecessor, inflation is on the march. With all four measures now above the target, and food price inflation is now twice as high as the Bank of Canada's target. We've got 2 million people lined up at food banks, and I know that people watching out there, when they walk down grocery aisles, they face nothing but anxiety and fear as they see prices that they cannot afford. And so we will be calling on Mr. Carney to introduce an affordable budget for an affordable life for Canadians. That includes bringing down the deficit to the level Liberals promised it would be at in their last fiscal update. It means getting rid of hidden food taxes like the industrial carbon tax on farmers and fish harvesters, getting rid of the food packaging tax, which drives up food prices $1 billion, getting rid of the fuel standard tax, which adds 17 cents a litre to diesel and to gasoline for our farmers, and getting rid of the inflation tax. No more money printing to pay the bills. We want this to be an affordable country where people's paychecks go further, and that's the message I'll be bringing to Prime Minister Carney.
Okay, I'm going to pause Pierre Poilievre there, but I will do a little bit of that Q&A in just a second. And again, I will play the Prime Minister and highlights from his speech coming up in case you didn't watch the whole half hour. Let's talk about what Pierre Poilievre just said there. He wants some things that I don't think they're unreasonable. We know we have a crisis happening in Canada, a number of them. But when it comes specifically to the cost of living, the number one costs are our housing and the food we eat. There are a number of different fees and taxes that Ottawa is charging or preparing to charge that drive up the cost of food. The industrial carbon tax, we all know and understand that. The Prime Minister did get rid of the consumer portion of the carbon tax, but there's still another side, the industrial side. Farmers pay that. The trucks that deliver the food to the grocery store, they pay that, etc. So there's a carbon tax that's still there that we're paying. He wants to get rid of the hidden taxes, things like the fuel standard tax. Okay, that again impacts the logistics, the shipping from the farm to the grocery store. The packaging tax. Yeah, the Liberals, as part of their quest to go green, have got new taxes coming in on packaging for food. That too is going to drive up the cost. Given what we now know about the September inflation numbers, that grocery inflation is still out of control, and we all see it every time we go to the grocery store. Are those unreasonable requests from Pierre Poilievre? If Mark Carney sat down with Pierre Poilievre, presumably it was either to tell him, hey, just so you know, we are going to be having an election, or to truly get his feedback. One of the things the Liberals keep saying is they want to collaborate with the other parties. They want to work with the other parties. Well, if those very reasonable things that Pierre Poilievre is proposing there are not in the budget, then I think that tells us all we need to know. They're not really interested in collaborating. They're not really interested in feedback from other parties. See, the way this works is We'll be having a budget on November the 4th. That is always going to be a confidence measure. When a government introduces a budget, that's a confidence vote. The Liberals need 3 votes in order for it to pass. If it doesn't pass, bam, we have an election. And if you've been listening this week, last week, and going back to July, I think you already know how I feel about this. I think the Liberals really want an election. They see a window coming up in December where they'll probably be able to trot out some sort of a trade deal that they've made with America. They're going to make Donald Trump into the bad guy again. And they're going to try and convince Canadians that we're having an election that they don't want because the opposition wouldn't support the budget. That's actually the wrong way to look at it. The way it has always worked in our parliamentary system is it's on the government to propose a budget that the opposition parties can get behind. It's not their job to get behind it. It's the government's job to present a budget that represents all sides. If the opposition and the government agree, then majority of the will of Canadians has been done in that budget. But that's not what the Liberals are talking about doing. They want to completely change how the budget is reported. They want to, if I'm being honest, bury a few things that are a little unsavory. They're hoping people don't really notice the actual bottom line and how in debt we are and how much our deficit is. They're hoping we don't look at how much money we pay in interest on our debt, because that is a major portion of every dollar that goes to Ottawa is just to service the debt. Pierre, I don't think, is asking for anything unreasonable here. Get rid of these extra fees, bring down the cost of living for Canadians. That would have an instant impact. But I don't think Mark Carney's going to do it because I don't think he wants conservative support on this budget. I think he really wants an election.
Are you confident that by the end of the day today, all of your MPs will still be Conservative MPs?
Yes.
Do you think that you went too far in saying the former Prime Minister should be in jail?
That's not what I said.
Hold on. Before we get to what he actually said, I was hoping that this would come up. There was a question there from a reporter asking, are you sure that at the end of the day, all of your MPs will still be in your caucus? Some of those on the left have tried to circulate this rumor that there's Conservatives getting ready to cross the floor and join the Liberals because they don't like what Pierre Poilievre said about Justin Trudeau or the RCMP. Maybe that's true, but I don't buy it. Maybe they're not even, maybe they're unhappy with what Pierre said. They're not crossing the floor to join the Liberals. If they got elected as a Conservative, they're not joining the Liberals because Conservatives have very, very, very different values than what the Conservatives do. The Liberals, and you're going to see it in the budget on November the 4th, they want to spend, spend, spend. They're calling it investing. It's spending. No matter how you slice it, they're going to take more money, they're going to print more as well, and they're going to spend it on massive projects. But they're also, at the same time, going to gut another part of the budget that pays the salaries for civil servants and things like that, the operational costs for government. That's how they get around we're going to spend less so that we can invest more. It's going to be generational spending, tons and tons and tons of it. But they're going to cut the things that Canadians count on and the civil service that needs that job. I don't think any Conservative is crossing the floor to join the Liberals because they don't like what Pierre Poilievre said about Justin Trudeau. I just don't see it. But anyway, let's get to the rest of that answer from Pierre Poilievre.
That's not what I said.
Heard. What did you say then? Repeat what you said.
Sure, I'll tell you what I said. I was asked about the scandals of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. And what would I do if such scandals and corruption were to happen when I become Prime Minister? And I said I would have zero tolerance for corruption. Nobody is above the law. So if I could, in certain cases, I think there were scandals in the Liberal government that would be appropriately punished in that way. You think of the Green Slush Fund, where individuals were appointed to a board to manage public funds. And what did they do with it? They gave it to themselves. To me, that is a crime for which they should have been held responsible. People have got to be held responsible for corruption. And if you look at my remarks, that's what I said. We will hold people accountable for corruption.
RCMP covered that. Do you still think the RCMP covered it up?
My criticisms of Ms. Lucky have been long-standing, and that's why we called for her to resign. We called for her to resign for a number of numerous scandals that she and the RCMP failed to investigate, for the political interference, the appalling political interference in the Portapique shooting case and countless others. We've had long-standing criticisms of Miss Lucky, the former commissioner, and we stand by those.
Okay, if they're going to go into some French here, I'll just take an opportunity to interject. Are you satisfied with that? Because that sounds fairly consistent with what I heard as well. It was a question that Pierre Poilievre was responding to on the Northern Perspectives podcast. And he said he would have absolutely no room in his government if he's prime minister, or when he's prime minister, I believe is what he said, for that kind of corruption. He's escalating it to the level of possible criminality. If he's doing that, I have to think that if he becomes prime minister and if one of his ministers went corrupt and started blowing money like the Green Slush Fund, that was an example that he used. Billions of dollars gone and given to friendly insiders, just basically handed to them for no work. When you look at the Arrive scam app, the app that was supposed to cost next to nothing and ended up costing millions and millions of dollars. These are all the Aga Khan trip that Justin Trudeau took to the Aga Khan's Island, SNC Lavalin. The list goes on. There's a lot of corruption, or alleged corruption, maybe I should say. If that sort of thing happened with one of his ministers or caucus members on his watch, not only would they be fired, sounds like he's referring that sort of stuff for criminal prosecution, because that's what he wanted to see happen with Trudeau, or what he thinks should have happened with Trudeau. That's an interesting bar to set, and frankly, I'm fine with it. I just don't want to get ripped off anymore. Every 2 weeks, I look at my pay stub and I look at the sick amount of money that goes to Ottawa, and it drives me crazy when they waste and squander that money. It drives me even more crazy when they're using it to get their friends rich. When they're just wink and nod, hand over money through this channel or that to make sure they get it. And they're probably getting a cut themselves. This is like gangster style stuff that's being run in Ottawa. There probably should be more police involvement. And if somebody misappropriates taxpayer money, if somebody loses it, if they squander it, if they do something nefarious with it, I'd like to know that the RCMP is going to investigate, and that it's going to be a fair investigation. And that if a politician broke the law, there will be appropriate consequences, just like there would be in the public sector. Maybe even more harsh. When you're in government, you are in a position of trust. We have to trust that you're spending our money appropriately. And if we find out you're not, maybe you should be referred for criminal prosecution. I personally am more than satisfied with what Pierre said there. I never thought it was inappropriate to say what he said about Justin Trudeau and the RCMP, knowing that specifically, and maybe this is a fault that Pierre has here, he should have said Brenda Lucki, the former RCMP commissioner, the one who was commissioner when all of these Trudeau things happened. I don't think what he said was inappropriate. And if he's now willing to live by the same sword and going to hold his caucus to the standard that he just set, that if you do something wrong with taxpayer money, if you break the law, I will personally refer you for criminal prosecution. Well, maybe he won't personally as prime minister, but someone will. And the RCMP will investigate. I think that's the best scenario for all of us. I really do. Because these people that we send to Ottawa and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to and give them every perk under the sun, and then we find out they're basically stealing our money and giving it to friends and family, I don't want to deal with that anymore. If you do it and you get caught, you're going to go to jail. Every politician should know that that is a possible outcome. I'm actually glad to hear that from Pierre Poilievre. One more.
Do you acknowledge that some Conservatives were upset by what you said about the RCMP?
Well, listen, my view is that Conservatives all agree on one thing. People should be held accountable for corruption, and my future government will do that. People will be held to the highest standard, and if there is ever corruption when I'm Prime Minister, the people involved will be fired and their cases turned over to the police.
There it is right there from the guy who wants to be Prime Minister. That sounds like accountability to me. That sounds like he is that confident that he's going to run an above-board government and that our taxpayer dollars are not going to get wasted, that he's willing to bring in the police if he finds out something happened similar to what's been happening over the last 10 years. You're welcome to feel however you want to feel about that, of course. But I think that that's a step in the right direction. I would like Mark Carney to commit to the exact same thing. If any Liberal MP gets caught abusing taxpayer money, or they get caught up in a scandal like some of the scandals we've seen over the last number of years, we call in the RCMP and you will be held accountable. Will Mark Carney hold the Liberals to the same standard that Pierre Poilievre is proposing for the Conservatives? I think that's great, and I think every politician in Ottawa should be on notice. FAFO. And if you do FA, you will FO. And there will be charges, and it possibly includes jail time. We should not be afraid to say jail, police investigation, and politician all in the same sentence. We should never be afraid of that. They should be afraid that that's a consequence if they FA. Hopefully you know what that means. Hopefully I kept that safe enough for you if you've got kids in the car or something like that. I'm going to move on, but I did want you to hear that because I think it's important, and I think that that's groundbreaking because I don't think I've ever heard somebody who's asking us for our vote, or will be in a few weeks, say that if anybody in his government screws around, the cops are coming in and they'll investigate it. And if they feel something criminal happened, someone could be going to jail. I think that that's very appropriate. I think that is something we should normalize. And I think that politicians and the left-wing media that is just trying to make such a huge deal about this, I think they do have a lot to worry about if that becomes the standard, because right now it seems like a playground with taxpayer money. Last night, Prime Minister Mark Carney billed it as an address to the nation. And it wasn't an address to the nation, not in any way. It was a speech to kids at the University of Ottawa that he somehow hoodwinked the mainstream media networks into carrying for free for a half hour. Normally, if a prime minister wants to get an important message across, they're going to keep it concise. They're going to use a lot of buzzwords. They're going to use some talking points. They're going to make it inspirational and make themselves seem like a leader that you can get behind. This speech was very long. Half an hour is a hell of a long time for the prime minister to give a prime time speech. It was a little over 30 minutes, to be honest. I'm not going to say it was not inspirational, but Mark Carney he's gotten a lot better at giving a speech, and his French is getting better as well. Credit to him. However, I don't know what the point of it was. You know, there was no big, incredible apex to that speech because I don't think that there was an ask at the end of it. He gave the speech to warn us that cuts are coming. He gave the speech to say that, again, our relationship with America has changed. I might even play that clip. He said he's going to do what he can to bring down housing prices, but he also said that to a room full of university students. And make no mistake, those students were not regular run-of-the-mill. They did a draft or a lottery on campus to see who got to go see the prime minister. They were hand-selected. Those were kids that the school was reasonably confident we're not going to heckle him. They would clap when he said something that seems like a clapping moment. It was very, very set up. Let's hear a little bit of the prime minister and see if we can figure out together what he was getting at last night. Because again, I'm still struggling to figure out what was the point of that speech and why was that considered an address to the nation?
It's been a while since I was in your shoes at university. It's been a long while, actually. It's been a long while, but one of the things is that there are some similarities to our experiences, okay? Trust me, I'm going to draw them out. The fact is, in particular, we will have both studied and entered the workforce. You will soon enter the workforce during times of immense change. Okay.
Just want to point out here, that's all the evidence you need. He wasn't doing an address to the nation. He was speaking to kids at the University of Ottawa, and for some reason, all the networks carried it like it was some sort of a primetime address from the Oval Office. There's certain circumstances where the prime minister will address the nation. I think the last one I can think of would have been COVID. Before that, maybe the 2008 financial crisis, and before that was 9/11. I think everybody in the country was watching Jean Chrétien after 9/11 address the nation. Those are important moments. When the prime minister says, I'm going to address the nation, but he's really just giving a stump speech, it really kind of cheapens the idea of a primetime address to the Canadian people. Just an observation. Here's the Prime Minister.
And I've learned a few things since I graduated, and I've increasingly understood this point that, life doesn't proceed in a straight line. And that the history and the progress of nations are punctuated by hinge moments. Times when the future literally hangs in the balance and when our actions can be decisive. Et dans des moments.
Okay, that's a little bit of the Prime Minister setting us up for something. And I really thought that he was going to get to something, but he didn't really do that. Here's more of the Prime Minister speaking in English.
So, because of these advantages, over decades our economy grew steadily, more integrated with the United States through the Free Trade Agreement of the 1980s, the NAFTA Accord of the 1990s, and eventually USMCA agreement signed in 2018. Canada's trade increased by over 400% during that period, and our economy doubled in size. But this process, this decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States, is now over. And as a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country, former strengths more particularly as our economy, strengths based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And as a result of that, the jobs of workers in our industries most affected by the U.S. tariffs in autos and steel and lumber are under threat. And our businesses are holding back investments restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us. Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was, even though in this new world of protectionism, we have the best trade deal of any other country, and we're working to make it even better still. Now, at the same time that all of this is happening, technology is changing the way we work, live, and communicate. When I was in graduate school, the World Wide Web, as we then called it, was that was the modern term of the information superhighway, if you ever heard of that. The World Wide Web, as we then called it, was just beginning. We used pen and paper in class. We talked on the telephone to each other. And we talked about the same news stories, the same movies, the same bands. My generation was connected by wires, yours is connected by code, and yet our society today is becoming ever more disconnected. Our public square is fragmented by online echo chambers, where truth and fiction can be hard to tell apart, and where contrasting ideas tend to polarize, not persuade.
A whole bunch of stuff in there. Number one, he's back to our relationship with America will never be the same. Man, you can tell he's getting ready for an election, right? You see it now, right? You know it's coming. He's going to call an election, or an election's going to happen. It seems like that's where this is going. He's bringing back the election talk. Remember the whole elbows up thing? That he's going to stand up to the bully? That he's the guy to negotiate? The thing is, now we know because we've seen him in action. He's been prime minister for 8 months, and we are no closer to a deal so far that they're letting on with America. He wasn't able to get it done, and maybe that's why he's going back to our relationship will never be the same. He's also weighing in a little bit on social media, talking about our public square. He is right about that. We've gone into echo chambers. There's not a lot of civil discourse happening right now because everybody goes to the platform that gives them what they want. If you're a conservative, maybe you like X because you like that people are saying the truth on X. If you're a liberal, maybe you like Blue Sky because you don't have to listen to those pesky conservatives talking about all the things that are wrong with Canada. You can just talk about the sunshine and rainbows and all that sort of thing. Maybe you like Facebook. Well, Facebook, you can't even have news on it. Facebook's more for the older folks, though, right? We've gotten ourselves into an echo chamber. Gone are the days when I feel that we should not have speed enforcement cameras, and you feel we should have speed enforcement cameras. And we sit down and we talk about the issue. And I tell you why I feel how I feel about it. You tell me why you feel how you feel about it. We try and find some common ground, or we agree to disagree. There's too much anonymity on the internet. There's a lot of people saying things on the internet that they wouldn't say to someone's face. And you know what? If they did, it would probably turn violent because we've lost the ability to debate. So far, most of what I've heard here seems very superficial, but I will point out, in fairness, that the Prime Minister is at least right about that. But what do we do about that? And how do you deal with that in a budget? Is it going to be a new tax of some sort? Or is he going to go back to trying again to regulate the internet? Because I kind of I feel like that's where that's going. That particular comment, regulate the internet and regulate free speech online. Here's more of the Prime Minister.
We used to build things in this country. We can build again. We used to explore this country. We can chart new courses again. We used to take big, bold risks in this country. It is time to swing for the fences again. We learned a little lesson about swinging for the fences a couple nights ago, as I recall. And this is what the upcoming budget will be about. Building, taking control, and winning. We will make generational investments with a plan to protect our communities, our borders, our way of life. We will build a stronger economy where everyone has a chance to get ahead. And we will empower Canadians with new opportunities, better careers, and a lower cost of living. Now, let me start with protection, because to build more of what we need, we must protect what we have. Safe communities attract people and families to put down roots, get a home, build a rewarding career, and ensure their children get a good education. So as soon as Parliament opened in the spring, we introduced the strongest legislation in Canadian history to secure our borders and crack down on gun trafficking.
I'm going to stop that particular clip there because he's just going into his stump speech. In fact, if you've been listening all week, he gave that speech. Maybe it was the end of last week. It was the day that he was at the RCMP detachment, and the RCMP was asked about the comments that Pierre Poilievre made. Go back and watch it. It's cut and paste right out of last week's speech. You don't need to sell us on safe neighborhoods, Mark. We all want safe neighborhoods. We've been asking for them and demanding them for a while. You're only just now getting around to it. If it goes far enough. I'm still waiting to see the full context of the justice reforms that the Liberals are going to propose. The Prime Minister here is setting us up for a lot of spending. That budget, when it comes out on November 4th, we haven't seen it yet, and nobody will until the 4th. However, he's setting us up for one side of it, the operational side, as he calls. This is their new way of accounting. It's not one budget, it's two. The operational side that pays the civil service and pays for the functions of government and things like that, that's going to get gutted. They're going to cut that a lot. But then they've got another side of the budget that they say is for investment. But then they're also going to try and classify everything under the sun, everything they want to spend money on, as an investment. And it's arguable whether or not it is or isn't an investment, but it's certainly not going to be an investment where we get a return on our investment. You know, that could be we need a new Rideau Hall, so we have to build it and spend probably billions to do it. Well, I mean, it's an investment in the sense that we needed it and we got it, but it's certainly not going to generate any revenue. It wouldn't even be valuable to sell it because no one's going to buy it. It can only be used as a residence for the Governor General. That's what they mean by investment. It's not really an investment. It's kind of an investment, but they're playing games. They are. And it's really just because they know, and this is from research that the government itself did, that when Canadians find out how broke they are, it might get ugly. There may be a revolt by the taxpayers. Maybe that's part of the reason that the Prime Minister came out last night and wanted that speech televised, is so that everybody starts setting themselves up for the fact that if this budget passes, generational investment is what he said. Generational debt is another way to say it. It's almost ironic that he did it in front of a class of university students because this is their bill. They're the ones who are going to, for the rest of their lives, have to pay off the money that Trudeau and now Carney are spending. I'm amazed he didn't get booed out of the room. The last place a Liberal Prime Minister should be right now is in a university, because it is young people that got screwed the hardest. Here's more of the Prime Minister.
We will protect the National Child Care Program for the over 900,000 children who are getting a strong start that they deserve, and for their parents who no longer have to choose between raising a family and keeping their careers. And as well, our budget will also bring in automatic federal benefits so that the millions of low-income Canadians who aren't part of the system can get the support that they need. Now, we need to be clear-eyed about where we stand today so we can build for tomorrow. Let me give the current economic context. I'm channeling my old central banker days here. Look, the situation in Canada now, the actual situation, is that the rate of inflation has come down. It's come down sharply. But it's also the case that the cost of living is still far too high. It's also the situation in Canada right now that we're building a lot more homes. Housing starts are up this year. And affordability of those houses are improving. But it's still challenging. We need to build many, many more homes, and we need to build them a lot faster. This government is getting immigration under control, with asylum claims down by a third and new temporary foreign workers down by more than 70% this year. To match immigration levels with our needs and our capacity to welcome them, this budget will include Canada's new immigration plan to do better for newcomers and for everyone.
How much better could we do for newcomers? They get a pretty sweet deal. They come here, they use the word asylum, we put them up in hotels and give them money every day for food. How much better could it get? They also get access to our world-class healthcare system and all of the other perks. How much better could we make it for them? You know, the Prime Minister says, oh, we're building more houses now. Housing starts are up. I've heard Justin Trudeau say that like every year for years now. I don't buy it anymore. He said, we've got immigration under control. I don't buy it. I don't believe him. I've heard this story too many times from the Liberals. They say one thing to make you think everything is good, but in reality, the sky is falling behind them.
It's also the fact that in this economy, we are creating jobs as a whole across it. And it is a fact that we are forecast to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7 over the course of the next 2 years. Even though some critical sectors, I mentioned earlier, autos, steel, lumber, forest products, aluminum, and some regions are facing big pressures.
He's right. They are facing big pressures. Those are cornerstones of the Canadian economy. Steel and aluminum, auto, softwood lumber, you name it. And he still thinks we're going to have the second or top two in the G7 performing economies. Was it next year, he said? Next year? In the top two performing economies in the G7. It's a fantasy. I can come out and say all these nice things too. And it sounds nice. Maybe it makes people feel good. Oh, yeah, great. Tops in the G7. That's not reality. We're one of the worst or the worst in just about every metric right now. He's forecasting that if he just gets this budget by, we're all of a sudden going to shoot to the top two. It doesn't make sense. I hope people see through this. That's not real. Those are platitudes in a speech that was meant to get applause. That's not a plan. And it's really, really frustrating that people are going to hear that and think, oh, great, everything's fine. He's got a plan, top two in the G7. And then what happens? Because we've been told that story before, and now we're dead last in a lot of ways. Then what? Are we going to hold him accountable or re-elect him again? Maybe we should just make him the Prime Minister for the next 20 years. Have at it. Go for it. Just keep telling us nice things, even if they're not true.
And to finish, because we're all in this together, I ask you to get involved.
Whoa. He just dropped a, we're all in this together. My God. You know, if you close your eyes when you're watching that speech, you can hear Trudeau. A lot. You can tell that they have the exact same people behind the scenes because just about everything Carney said, if you close your eyes, you can hear Justin Trudeau saying those things. It's the same thing, guys. It's a bait and switch. They did it during the election. They're getting ready for another election, and they're doing it now. Listen to all these niceties. Feel good about it, and go to sleep tonight knowing your government has got it under control. And people do that because they believe it. It's not under control. This budget, we haven't seen it yet. I don't know how big the deficit's going to be. I don't know how big the debt is. I don't know exactly how much of every dollar is going to pay off that debt. I don't know what's going to get cut. I don't know any of it yet. But it seems very, very ominous. Have yourselves a great day. Tomorrow is Listener DM Friday. Anna Almeida is going to join me. The episode will drop around 11 a.m. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and you will hear it tomorrow right here on Scott Fox After 9. Pat James and The Whole Truth. This is Hey Now.